God, we've got a desk jockey playing secret agent. Cole roared with laughter, holding up his phone to live stream as Emily Carter stepped onto the shooting range. She stood at just 5'2", her trembling hands raising a discarded Glock, long retired from the armory. The audience howled with amusement. An administrative clerk daring to challenge the HRT team? This was bound to be an embarrassing flop. But in Emily's weary, shadowed eyes lay something no one saw. Memories of hostages in Mexico, of blood and fire, of a mission the CIA never acknowledged. She wasn't here for entertainment. She was here to unlock a secret buried 5 years ago. And when the first target appeared, the entire training room would realize they weren't laughing at a desk clerk, but standing before a ghost from the past. The only question left was, would that past save them, or destroy them all? "Drop that piece of junk toy now!" The shout echoed through the Quantico shooting range, where FBI trainees faced the toughest test of their lives. The air, already thick with tension, erupted in mocking laughter as all eyes turned to Emily Carter. She stood silently at lane 12, barely 5'3", her slight frame nearly swallowed by a worn bulletproof vest. In her hands a cracked Glock 17, its trigger stiff as if salvaged from a scrap heap. Emily's trembling fingers gripped the weapon tightly, trying to steady it under the scornful gazes of dozens of young agents watching. Cole, a hulking HRT agent, towering nearly a foot over Emily, stepped forward, his growl laced with disdain. "Carter, this is Quantico's final test, not an antique show. That piece of trash isn't even fit for rookie cop training." The training room burst into laughter. A few trainees pulled out their phones, recording what they assumed was a farce. An admin clerk who spent her days filing papers at headquarters daring to stand among the FBI's elite candidates, utterly ridiculous. Emily didn't respond. She only adjusted her grip, pulling the gun close, her eyes locked on the target 25 meters away. Her trembling fingers found a familiar anchor, yet there was a strange precision in her stance. The shooting instructor, veteran Agent Hayes, narrowed his eyes. He'd seen thousands of trainees, from amateur shooters to ex-special forces. But something about Emily's posture, her breathing, the slight pivot of her feet for balance, it wasn't the stance of a desk clerk. It was the mark of someone who'd fired in conditions where no mistakes were allowed. Cole wasn't done. He stepped closer, using his bulk to pile on the pressure. "Listen, Carter. This isn't your office. This is the playground for real players. Put the gun down and step aside before you make a fool of yourself in front of the entire FBI." Emily took a deep breath. For a moment, memories flooded back: hostages, screams in Mexico, gun smoke in a stifling room, blood pooling on concrete. The trembling in her hands didn't stop, but her breathing steadied. "Regulation 4.3, Emily said softly, just loud enough for Hayes to hear. "Any weapon capable of firing standard FBI ammo is valid for the test. This gun still fires." Cole raised an eyebrow, but Hayes nodded in confirmation. He took the Glock, tested the trigger. A dry click sounded. It worked, barely. He tossed it back to Emily, his expression unreadable. "Technically, she's right. Let her shoot." A wave of murmurs erupted. Some trainees snickered, imagining the tiny woman missing shot after shot, a laughingstock for the room. Cole shook his head, smirking, and rejoined his HRT teammates. "Fine. Let's see what the desk clerk does with that scrap metal." Emily laid down her shooting mat, checking her magazine. Her movements were swift, startlingly precise. No haste, no waste, just clean, economical motions, like a ritual performed thousands of times before. Hayes frowned. He'd seen that kind of weapon check not from academy trainees but from operatives who'd survived black missions never recorded in official files. "All candidates, to your positions?" The loudspeaker blared across the room. The first target dropped into place, 10 life-sized paper silhouettes at 25 meters. Time, 60 seconds. 10 rounds. Accuracy would decide who advanced. The air shifted from mockery to anticipation. Tense breaths filled the room. Cole and the HRT team grinned confidently, raising their weapons, ready to prove the gap between warriors and a desk clerk. Emily knelt on her mat, lifting the broken Glock. The trembling was still visible, but her eyes were locked, unwavering. For a fleeting moment, the training room seemed to freeze. Then the buzzer sounded. Gunfire erupted from the other lanes, bullets tearing through paper. The HRT fired in precise double-tap rhythms, methodical and powerful. Emily remained still. 30 seconds passed. Eyes turned her way. A few laughed. "She's frozen," Cole shouted. "Hey, Carter, need someone to hold your hand." But Emily wasn't listening. She was waiting for the familiar moment when her heartbeat and tremors merged, guiding the bullet to an impossible mark. And then, bang! The first shot rang out. On the digital display, 10 points dead center in the heart of target 3. The room fell silent. Dear audience, pause for a moment to subscribe to the channel before diving into the heart of the story, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's fascinating to see people from all over joining us. That day began like any other. At 4:30 a.m., the alarm blared in Emily Carter's tiny apartment on the outskirts of Quantico. She sprang up like a coiled spring, no hesitation, as if her body were programmed. She'd slept only 3 hours, her rest fractured by jumbled memories. A dim concrete room, hostages' screams, the acrid smell of gunpowder and metallic blood in the air. She opened her eyes, knowing the nightmares would return tomorrow. But morning came as always, unchanging, and she had to rise. In her 10-square-meter room, everything was arranged with military precision. On the table, a small metal pill box sat neatly. Emily's trembling hands opened it, retrieving 2 pale gray pills, part of an experimental treatment for neurological trauma, just enough to suppress her tremors until sunset. She swallowed them dry, no water, then stood still, waiting. The small twitches in her fingers slowly subsided, never fully gone. Emily slipped into a faded FBI jacket, issued for administrative staff on her first day. The small Carter label was frayed, crumpled like a disguise. To her colleagues, she was an unremarkable clerk, typing reports, filing records, printing forms. No one asked why her hands shook. No one noticed how she sat quietly in the corner, staring into the distance while the office buzzed. They certainly didn't know about the scars hidden under her long sleeves, jagged lines from wrist to bicep, evidence of shrapnel once embedded and removed in a field hospital. She left her apartment before dawn, her old car rumbling in the winter chill. The highway was nearly empty, its yellow lights stretching into an endless stream. Every curve, every sign, every bridge was memorized like a drill. Escape routes, hiding spots, habits carved into her bones from years in hell. Even now, just driving to work, her body instinctively calculated it all. At Quantico, Emily arrived before anyone else. Using her limited admin access, she passed through the armory. There, on the last rack, were the discarded weapons, rusted, cracked, jammed. She chose a Glock 17, its frame split, its trigger so stiff it required force to pull. Others would see it as junk, but to Emily, it was a perfect metaphor. Broken, trembling, yet still capable of firing when needed. In the dim light, she wiped the grime from the metal, her movements both firm and deliberate, like a ceremony. Her trembling hands found a familiar rhythm, smooth enough to seem guided by silent music. The last time she'd done this wasn't in a quiet Virginia room, but in a damp warehouse outside Mexico City, where every second decided life or death for hostages beyond the wall. She'd survived, but at a permanent cost. Her trembling hands never stopped shaking since that day. Today's test wasn't for fun. It wasn't just a chance to join the tactical ranks. something the entire academy thought she'd never achieve. It was her only way to expose a traitor. For 3 months at the FBI, Emily had sifted through databases, piecing together forgotten clues. Every lead pointed to one place, Quantico, within the HRT itself. They had sold out her mission years ago, leaving her and her team in a bloodbath. And today, in the brightly lit training room, as the HRT stepped forward with arrogant confidence, Emily knew the truth would no longer stay buried. Her first shot had rung out, the bullet piercing the paper target's heart to everyone's shock. But that was just the opening shot. Behind it loomed a storm about to sweep through Quantico, a storm carrying both the past and words no one dared speak. Because Emily Carter wasn't a trembling clerk who stumbled upon a broken gun. She was a remnant of a mission that never existed, bearing scars of a secret the FBI and CIA wanted forgotten. And today, in Quantico's glaring light, those ghosts would rise. All right, my dear audience, if you're gripped by this story, comment 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. A mechanical clank sounded as the target system lowered. 10 white paper silhouettes glowed under the training lights, standing 25 meters away, each representing a hypothetical enemy. The room fell silent for a moment, then exploded in rapid gunfire. Gleaming brass casings flew, the sharp scent of gunpowder filling the confined space. Emily lay prone on her mat, her trembling hands clutching the broken Glock. The stiff trigger bit into her fingertips. While others fired in a frenzy, her body stayed still, her breathing slow, her heartbeat pounding in her chest. She didn't watch the artificial wind flags overhead like the others. She noted subtle cues, the heat ripples from the vents, the faint sway of the paper targets, the swirl of dust in the light. Seemingly trivial details became her compass. 10 seconds passed. 20. Some glanced her way, smirking as she hadn't fired a shot. Her trembling hands seemed to confirm it. She was scared, helpless, just a foolish clerk. Cole shot a mocking glance, relishing what he thought was her collapse. But Emily was used to waiting. In stifling rooms far from here, she'd held her breath for minutes, timing each heartbeat to pull the trigger at the perfect moment. Her tremors never stopped, but they had a rhythm. If she fired in the pause between spasms, the bullet would fly true. A lesson learned in blood. Hers and her team's. Then her first shot cracked. A dry, unassuming sound, unlike the sharp pops of newer Glocks. The digital display lit up. A perfect 10, dead center in Target 3's heart. The room froze. A murmur spread, then silenced as she fired again. Another 10, center of Target 7. Emily's rhythm wasn't fast, but it was relentless. Each trigger pull, each bullet's release, synced with a pre-calculated breath. She never looked away from the target, never hesitated, never wasted motion. Each shot stacked atop the last, clean as a cold signature carved into paper. By her 5th shot, Target 9 showed a single widening hole, not a scatter. The veterans behind the glass barrier began to shift their expressions. They'd seen tight groupings, but rarely from a near-useless gun and trembling hands. Silence settled, broken only by gunfire from other lanes, yet the room's focus locked on lane 12. Cole tried to hold his confidence, but his eyes followed Emily's shots. His own grouping was clean, 9 seconds, 10 seconds, but it paled against her absolute precision. Unease crept in, then worry, as if the ground beneath him trembled. When her 10th shot fired, the timer read 152. Score, 100 over 100. 10 bullets formed a single tight cluster so perfect the system rescanned to confirm. Some trainees stopped firing, staring at the screen, their smoking guns still in hand. The earlier laughter vanished, replaced by a heavy, taut silence. Emily set her gun down, her hands shaking harder now off the trigger. She exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from her brow, then sat up as if nothing had happened. Her eyes were calm, seeking no praise, expecting no applause. Hayes stared at the scoring screen. He knew the difference between luck and skill. One good shot could be chance. 2 bullseyes could be explained. But 10 perfect shots from a broken gun? Never random. That was experience, forged in thousands of hours and dozens of real battles. On the observation deck, senior officers whispered, their eyes uneasy. A small, trembling woman had just shot better than the FBI's finest. They began to wonder who she was and why a clerk had skills beyond their elite trainees. Emily quietly holstered her gun, as if completing a routine task. But in her chest, her heart raced. This was only the first round. She'd drawn every eye to her, and that meant the traitor who'd sold out her team years ago was watching too. The metallic clang rang out as new targets slid into place. 3 rows of automated silhouettes lit up at 10, 15, and 25 meters. This time, the rules changed. 30 rounds, 30 seconds. No pauses to steady breathing, no time to wait out tremors. Only speed and instinct. The red light blinked. The room echoed with the clatter of fresh magazines. HRT agents adjusted their holsters, muscles tense, ready to unleash the speed they'd drilled thousands of times. In their minds, Emily Carter had hit her limit. Luck could carry someone through one precise round. But rapid fire, blending speed and accuracy, that was the domain of real soldiers. The green light flashed. The room exploded in a hail of gunfire, a chaotic symphony. HRT agents fired in pairs, 2 shots per beat, checking, then firing again. Clean, sharp, clockwork. Bullets tore into targets, brass casings littered the floor, the sharp tang of gunpowder rising. At lane 12, Emily found her own rhythm. She didn't fire in pairs like the others. Her trembling hands didn't wait for pauses, they turned the tremors into a trajectory. The broken Glock quivered, but its shakes merged with her body's motion. Bullets flew in a steady stream, not a chaotic storm but a controlled flow, like water over rocks. Her first 10 rounds fired in under 8 seconds. As the magazine emptied, her left hand moved before the last casing hit the floor. A fresh magazine clicked into place in a seamless motion, too fast for the eye to follow. A movement etched into muscle memory, rehearsed in darkness, in pain, in rooms where half a second's delay meant death. The next 10 rounds came faster. Targets at 10 meters took hits to the head. At 15 meters, center mass. At 25 meters, a 3-shot sequence. Pelvis, torso, skull. No one in the room was taught to shoot like that. It wasn't a scoring pattern. It was a killing pattern. The noisy room seemed to slow, as if time stretched. Some trainees stopped firing, drawn to lane 12. Hayes clenched his jaw, eyes tense. He'd trained thousands, seen the FBI's best, but never a clerk who turned tremors into a lethal weapon. As Emily loaded her 3rd magazine, sweat streamed down her temples, but her breathing held steady. Her right hand shook violently, but her eyes stayed on target. The trigger jammed, the cracked frame groaned, yet she pressed on. No hesitation, no slowing. 30 seconds ended. The targets dropped. The digital display showed 30 glowing points, all in kill zones. Time, 27.4 seconds. Score, perfect. In the cramped room, silence roared louder than gunfire. The HRT agents exchanged glances, their arrogance replaced by shock. Cole gripped his Glock, veins bulging. His grouping was tight, precise, but next to the cold destruction on the screen, it looked like schoolyard practice. Emily lowered her gun, her hands trembling more than ever. She didn't hide it, didn't pretend strength. The tremors were real, but so were the results. Behind her, a veteran agent frowned, sending a brief, encrypted text. Just a few words. Ghost pattern. Quantico. As the message left the base's signal tower, undercurrents stirred. Old doors creaked open. The ghosts Emily thought she'd buried were rising. All right, my dear audience, take a moment to relax, maybe grab a glass of water, then dive back into this gripping story. Comment 1 if you're hooked. And don't forget to subscribe. The training room fell silent as the target system activated. Lights raced along tracks, gears grinding against metal. Then human-shaped targets sprang up. No longer static circles. Now they darted side to side, weaving past obstacles, vanishing, then reappearing. The moving target ran the test that made even seasoned HRT agents sweat. 30 seconds, 10 targets, each speeding up after a hit. The room hummed with the sound of machinery, like the breath of a beast challenging everyone inside. Emily stood still at lane 12. Her trembling hands loaded a new magazine, but her eyes didn't linger on the gun. She scanned the room, noting faint details, light reflecting off the floor, dust quivering in artificial wind, the steady rhythm of gears signaling a target's emergence. She didn't watch the targets. She watched the spaces where they'd appear. The red signal blinked, then died. A target shot out from the left, darting across at 15 meters. Gunfire erupted across the room. HRT agents tracked it with their eyes, spraying bullets along its path. Emily stayed silent. Her Glock trembled, but no shot fired. 2 seconds later, as the target neared a barrier, her gun barked. 1 shot. The bullet hit the chest just before the target vanished. The display flashed. Hit. No one had time to react before the second target raced out. Farther 25 meters, moving faster. Emily didn't chase it. She tilted her body, aligned the barrel at an odd angle, and fired. The target fell, as if seeking the bullet itself. The room's pulse shifted. Other shooters faltered, some hitting, some missing. But Emily's tremors synced with each target's brief exposure. 2 targets appeared at once, one near, one far. Her Glock fired twice, the sound almost one crisp note. Both targets dropped. A taut silence gripped the room. Observers behind the glass leaned forward. They knew what they were seeing. This wasn't luck. This was predictive shooting, a skill only battle-hardened agents possessed. Most learned to react to targets. Emily learned to anticipate them by half a beat. The targets grew trickier, faster. Some hid behind obstacles, flashing briefly. Others retreated into shadows, then lunged. Each time, Emily's battered Glock shook, but her shots landed true. Not just accurate, ordered. Chest, head, pelvis, instant kill zones. Only 2 targets remained. One charged diagonally forward, the other darted sideways. The room held its breath. Emily fired twice, so fast it sounded like one fractured note. Both targets fell in unison. Time stopped. The screen displayed 10/10 targets, 34 seconds. No stray shots. The room erupted in silence. The HRT agents self-assured as the gold standard stood frozen. Some lowered their guns, staring at their own scattered patterns. Emily's looked like a razor-sharp line, every bullet exactly where it belonged. Behind the glass, a man in civilian clothes scribbled frantically. His eyes widened, recognizing a familiar pattern. The ghost pattern, mentioned in classified files, erased from official records. Emily lowered her gun. Her hands shook uncontrollably, no longer steadied by firing rhythm. She breathed heavily, sweat soaking her collar. But her eyes didn't waver. They flicked toward the glass, instinctively sensing a watcher. A chill ran through the room. The HRT trainees stood silent, their mockery replaced by an unnamed fear. They no longer saw Emily as a clerk. They saw something else, a mystery beyond their grasp. And deep down, they knew this was only the beginning. The training room dimmed. Moving targets retracted into the dark, replaced by optical sensors, 360-degree projectors, and VR headsets. The final test, a battlefield simulation. No more mechanical tracks. Candidates would enter a virtual world where every choice could save hostages or kill them. Emily took the VR headset from the instructor. Her broken Glock synced to the system. Each trigger pull translated into optical ballistics. Outside, observers would see her virtual world unfold on a massive screen. The room darkened. Only the candidate's breathing broke the silence. Then the screen flared to life. Emily stood in a ruined street. Faint yellow light spilled across graffiti-covered walls. Distant screams echoed. The system had chosen the urban terrorist hostage rescue scenario, the hardest level. Shadows moved. Gunfire crackled from rooftops. A child's cry rang from an apartment. Her hands trembled violently, but she didn't rush. She pressed her back to a virtual wall, breathing deeply, letting the chaos blend into a single stream. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. The tremors in her hands synced with visual cues, a drill she'd practiced thousands of times, not in Quantico, but in places never mapped. She moved. Light, low steps, as if the ground could explode with a misstep. An enemy appeared at a corner. HRT training demanded instant shots. Emily waited half a second. In that fragile pause, the simulation revealed a detail. A trembling child behind the terrorist. Her broken Glock fired. The bullet grazed the terrorist's shoulder, dropping him without hitting the child. The hostage fled. Safe. The external screen flashed. Hostage survived. Murmurs rippled through the observers. HRT was known for speed, but this test scored judgment too. Emily pressed on. 3 armed men blocked a narrow hall. Her trembling hands moved with the gunfire's rhythm. 3 shots, 3 kill zones, head, chest, pelvis. Virtual bodies fell with metallic echoes. The screen analyzed her shots. No deviation, no random scatter. Pure instinctual control. The climax came. A small room, 4 bound hostages, 3 terrorists with AK-47 seconds. One wore a heavy coat, unnaturally bulky, a simulated suicide bomber. A timer ticked on his wrist. The observers held their breath. This challenge had failed over 70% of trainees. One wrong move, and all hostages would die. Emily stood at the doorway. Her hands shook violently. Her eyes closed for half a second. When they opened, she no longer saw the system's graphics. Instead, her mind flashed to Mexico. An abandoned warehouse, hostages bound with wire, a man in an explosive vest, a ticking clock, blood, smoke, fallen teammates. Her tremors surged, the gun rattling, but her body slipped into an old mode. Her eyes scanned each face. Her brain calculated beyond conscious thought. Angles, chain reactions, target order. The first shot pierced the bomber's head before his finger reached the timer. The second and third dropped the others in one fluid beat. The hostages lived. The system blazed red. Mission success. 100% survivors. The training room's lights snapped on. Emily removed her headset, sweat-drenched, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun. The room was deathly silent. No mocking laughter, no live-streaming phones. Only a heavy, trembling quiet. In the observation booth, a plainclothes agent rushed out, whispering into a secure phone. Fragmented words carried, "Carter, ghost, still alive." Emily didn't hear, but she felt it. The air shifted. A ripple spread through the base. The secrets she'd hidden for 5 years were cracking open. And she knew this fight wasn't over. All right, my dear audience. If you're gripped by this story, comment 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. The training room's air grew thick. The projector's hum died, but the faint smell of simulated gunpowder lingered. Every trainee and judge stood silent, as if the simulation's echo still hung in the space. Emily set the cracked Glock on the table, her hands trembling violently, but her eyes burned with a fierce, taut intensity. Cole, the HRT leader, clung to his bravado, though sweat soaked his collar. He'd won rapid-fire contests, been hailed as the FBI's model, but what he'd just witnessed was different. Not luck. Not a performance. Something that chilled his veins. In the observation booth, two plainclothes figures whispered, their voices low. Emily didn't need to hear them. She knew. The word ghost, her buried codename from 5 years ago, had been spoken again. And when a codename revives, the past no longer sleeps. Williams, the veteran judge, cleared his throat, trying to restore order, but a small detail shattered the silence. An HRT trainee, face pale, his hand inching toward his holster. Emily saw it instantly. Not a random gesture. The reflex of someone preparing to draw, not to compete, but to kill. Time slowed. Memories flooded back. Mexico, Mogadishu, traps, false allies. Emily needed no more proof. This man was the final link, the one who'd sold the intel that ambushed her team. The traitor wasn't out there. He was in the FBI's elite HRT. Her hands shook wildly, but her body knew this feeling. She lunged, not with muscular speed but with instinctive precision. The broken Glock stayed on the table. She didn't need it. One fluid motion. Her arm locked his wrist as he touched his gun. A twist, a soft crack of bone. The weapon never left its holster. The room reeled. Trainees staggered back, disbelieving. But Emily didn't release him. Her eyes bored into the traitor's, not with anger or fear, but the cold emptiness of someone all too familiar with betrayal. Security stormed in. Plainclothes agents from the booth swarmed, cuffing the man. The sharp clink of handcuffs rang out, a sound familiar in sealed interrogation rooms. One read the charges: espionage, data trafficking, direct link to the 2018 mission failure. The crowd erupted in murmurs. The proud HRT stood frozen. Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. He understood. What he'd mocked as a joke was now a mirror exposing his own blindness. Emily released her grip and sank into a chair. Her shoulders trembled, not from fear but from the weight of release after years. She didn't watch the traitor dragged away. She stared at her hands, hands that had carried her through hell and now closed a circle. But the silence didn't last. A phone on the training table buzzed. Not hers. Not the judge's. The traitor's. Its screen flashed an unread message. A plainclothes agent glanced at it, then locked eyes with Emily. The screen read 3 words: Vienna, family. Her heart clenched. No doubt remained. The story wasn't over. This traitor was just one link. Beyond him were invisible hands, secrets yet to break, ghosts that refused to rest. In Quantico's harsh white light, Emily Carter stood. Every eye turned to her no longer with scorn or mockery, only awe, mixed with respect and fear. She said nothing. Her performance, her shots, and the truth she'd exposed spoke for her. But in her mind, a quiet question echoed. Had she closed a chapter or opened a new mission? The Quantico training room emptied, but the echoes lingered. Where mocking laughter once filled the air, now only silent, shaken, and reverent stares remained. Emily Carter stepped outside, her small frame fading into the late afternoon light. No one stopped her. No one dared speak. She knew exposing the traitor wasn't the final victory. It was a door to a deeper abyss. The brief message, Vienna, family, cut like a blade. It reminded her the shadow network still thrived, and her past wasn't closed. But Emily had proven one thing. Her trembling hands weren't a sign of weakness, but a living memory of battles fought to survive. Those tremors forged a unique strength, one no one could mock anymore. In Quantico's empty halls, Emily vowed to herself, if the ghosts of her past still lived, she would too. Not to prove anything to others, but to keep the truth from being buried again. The question now wasn't what Emily could do, but whether the world was ready for the return of a ghost.
The muzzle flash of the M4, lit against the backglow of floodlights, reflected across Hannah Carter's face as she tapped lightly on the bolt carrier, hearing a faint click enough to know the rifle wasn't entirely sound. In the middle of the outdoor firing range at Camp Coyle, San Diego, she stopped firing, took a long breath, then smiled. A Navy SEAL stepped into view, throat dry, eyes following the path of each round, silently watching her. She turned. Having disassembled his HK 416-inch just 30 seconds, and he realized she was far more than just a gun hand. That moment marked the beginning of a journey that would redefine the meaning of respect and professional worth. In the morning, the wind from the Pacific curled across the southern firing range at Camp Pendleton, carrying with it the scent of salt water and the burnt tang of old gunpowder. Hannah Carter stood still, her back to the row of targets, sunlight slanting under the brim of her cap to cast a faint halo on the collar of her uniform, its edges faded from wear. She had just completed the first weapons inspection of the day load. Test, fire, recheck, a routine cycle, but never dull to her. It was now her third week assigned as technical support for the joint training between the Marines and SEAL Team 3, a position not meant to stand out, only to be precise, according to her orders. And indeed, Hannah hadn't stood out. She moved like a shadow between rows of equipment, always appearing before someone needed a weapon and gone before they could manage a thank you. The only problem was, no one thought she mattered. Most of the younger SEALs called her the bolt-turning lady. Some shook their heads when they saw her carefully measure the grip tension on a rifle stock as if tuning a violin. They weren't used to a brown-haired technician, barely 5'3", who could tell the exact revolutions of a drive bolt simply by hearing a click off by 1,000th of a second. To them, she was an anomaly, a strange deviation in the system. She didn't care. Each day, she arrived earlier than the watchman. She wiped every rail, aligned every red dot sight, tested each slide with the quarter she kept for that purpose, not to impress anyone. But because a life in the field often rested on a mere 1/10 of a second lost to a dust-jammed trigger, this morning, she heard the familiar murmur behind her again, a group of new guys chatting. One laughed loud enough to cut through the wind. "Hey, that tech girl can strip an M4 faster than swapping a tampon," the group chuckled. Hannah didn't turn. She simply set the HK 416 down on the felt mat, removed the bolt carrier group as if opening an old window, silent, precise. On her shoulder, her name patch still bore the faint residue of old glue. Carter, H. Blurred but steady. That was when the wind shifted. Heavy, measured footsteps sounded behind her, thudding lightly on the packed gravel. A large shadow fell across her. Without turning, Hannah already knew who was approaching. He was the only person here who could change the air in a room just by stepping into it. Sergeant Nathan Brick Callahan, SEAL Team 3's operational-level weapons maintenance chief, was spoken of as a living legend among Navy armorers. 6 deployments, 3 under-fire weapons repairs, twice fixing an M4 grip in the middle of a contact point. Some said Callahan could gauge a barrel's temperature from its echo. True or not, he'd earned the nickname Brick because, like a brick, he was unshakable, said little, and was always there to keep things from falling apart. Callahan wasn't one to smile, but today he stopped directly behind her, his rough voice breaking the quiet textured with black coffee and hundreds of hours in combat. "You've got the quarter facing the wrong way. Heads up makes it slip easier." Hannah turned. Callahan's steel-gray eyes weren't on her, but locked on the rifle. Yet in that gaze, something had shifted, not recognition, but the first step toward paying attention. She smiled, faintly, the way one nods to a familiar song on the radio. "Is that so? I figured a gun could use a little luck." No reply came, but the air was no longer the same. Can a single quarter break down the invisible wall between doubt and trust? You'll want to stay and see how it does exactly that.
Welcome to Veteran Life Stories, where real sacrifice meets unforgettable storytelling. Subscribe and keep their courage alive.
Hannah couldn't remember the first time she ever held a gun. She only remembered the smell of gun oil soaked into her memory like a fragment of childhood scent, that slick, cold, and strangely clean aroma. Summer evenings in the suburbs of Phoenix, when the neighborhood kids were still splashing water in their backyards, she would sit cross-legged beside her father, under the dim yellow glow of a lone fluorescent bulb hanging from the porch, listening to the click of metal sounding steady as an adult's heartbeat. Her father, James Carter, was a veteran weapons technician with the Desert Rangers, a volunteer paramilitary group specializing in counter-narcotics operations along the Arizona-New Mexico border. He wasn't the talkative type, but each time he stripped down an AR-15, he seemed to become a silent storyteller, steady, deliberate, every motion carrying a message, discipline, detail, and respect for the tools that protect life. A good bullet is the quietest soldier in a fight. He said that when she wasn't yet tall enough to reach a crate of ammunition, Hannah didn't fully understand it back then, but later she realized her father wasn't just teaching her technique, he was teaching her how to be silent and still have worth. She learned to feel a weapon with her fingertips, the way a craftsman feels the grain of wood. When you clean the carbon off a bolt carrier, you can tell who last used the weapon and whether they trusted it. A clean rifle, straight firing with a smooth trigger, was a kind of promise, and in a chaotic world, sometimes that promise was the only thing standing between life and death. Of course, the neighbors didn't see it that way. A girl with guns? You joining the mafia or something? One nearby mother had thrown that line when she caught Hannah cleaning a barrel instead of playing with dolls. The kids were kinder, but not without side eyes every time she brought empty shell casings to school to make decorations. Few understood that to Hannah, an empty casing wasn't a symbol of violence, but of a mission completed. The jabs didn't make her rebel, they just made her quieter. She retreated into a world of her own where every detail had a reason, where every margin of error had consequences. Ironically, the better she got, the more she was pushed aside. In high school, she won first place in a simulated M16 assembly competition, but the gym teacher flat out told her, "You should try out for the girls' baseball team, leave the guy stuff alone." That was the first crack in Hannah's understanding between actual ability and how people treated it. She wasn't angry, not deeply sad either. But with every bolt she tightened, every barrel she polished until it mirrored the light, she poured into it something she couldn't quite say aloud, the quiet kindness of those who choose to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. When she grew up, Hannah didn't choose a traditional college. She applied to the military's technical support program, completing all mechanical proficiency tests in half the standard time. Her instructors called her Ghost Wrench because she finished before others had even begun. By the age of 23, she had worked on more than 80 different weapon systems, from simple pistols to heavy machine guns mounted on armored vehicles. But everywhere she went, the same look followed: skepticism first, acceptance later, and sometimes nothing at all. Camp Pendleton was no different. Only, this time, Brick Callahan's gaze lingered a fraction longer. And maybe, just maybe, for the first time in years, someone was noticing without her having to speak first. Comment 1 if you think this story is worth it, so we know you're still here. That morning began like any other, at Pendleton's sunlight slanting in, gravel crackling under the boots of Marines, and the familiar burnt smell from the firing line. The guns not yet cooled from the previous day's drills, but in the air, there was something slightly different, quieter, a little tighter. Hannah sensed it before she saw them. SEAL Team 3 arrived like a low-pressure front, not loud, but every movement carried weight. They stepped into the technical bay as if the floor had just turned into the deck of a warship. Their eyes swept over each rifle on the racks, hands reaching out, no introductions needed. And then he appeared, the young operator, with a stance that seemed to shorten time by sheer presence. He was the team's lead marksman, holding his HK-416 with the ownership of an artist cradling an antique Italian violin. Each step was a note in the silent symphony that special operations units had long since mastered. Hannah stood not far away, drying the fourth operating rod of the day. Light slanted through the window, falling directly on her wrist, where a small scar remained from hot oil splattering her 3 years ago. She looked up, quietly observing. The marksman approached, tested the trigger, tilted the HK-416, then gave a brief nod. He was about to leave when Hannah spoke, not loudly, not softly, but at exactly the frequency that makes a person stop. "Do you hear that?" He turned, brow furrowed. No one else in the room reacted, but Hannah had already placed a quarter on the HK's bolt carrier channel, giving it a light shake. The sound that came wasn't metal on metal, it was a faint, dry clink, just slightly offbeat. She didn't wait for a response. Her hands moved like a precisely programmed machine, removing the buffer tube, opening the bolt carrier group, separating the chamber, each motion as exact as if performed by a finely tuned assembly line robot. In under 30 seconds, the rifle lay neatly disassembled on the mat, each component aligned, clean as if it had just left the Heckler & Koch factory floor. She pointed to the back face of the hammer, a small, irregular wear mark so minor an untrained eye might mistake it for dust. But Hannah knew this was the beginning of stress fatigue, the kind that could lock a trigger after 20-30 rounds, especially when the barrel heated. The SEAL looked at her, then back at the rifle. His expression shifted from skeptical to startled, then into a quiet sort of acknowledgement that required no words. Hannah pulled out a tube of specialized lubricant, worked it into the contact point, then reassembled the weapon. She didn't need to look, she listened. When she slid the bolt into final lock, the clack rang out crisp, solid, and in the exact pitch she had memorized at the age of 9, under the dim fluorescent light in her Phoenix backyard. The marksman tested the trigger. His lips pressed together as if to say something, but instead he only nodded slowly. No praise, no handshake, just the rare silence between two people from different worlds, connected by a rifle that had just been brought back to life. The rest of the team saw it but said nothing. They didn't have to. In the military, there's a silent language only those who live at the edge of tolerances understand. It's when you watch someone save your life before you even knew you were about to lose it. Hannah turned away as if nothing had happened. She moved on to cleaning another rifle. But the quarter still sat there, catching the sunlight as if it knew it had just helped rewrite a perception. From across the room, Brick Callahan leaned against the doorway. He didn't intervene, but his gaze, deep, steady, and weighted, was marking something down, not on a report, but in memory. Camp Pendleton at night had a beauty of its own, cold, unyielding, like the soldiers who had passed through it. The sky was no longer blue but shaded into the ash gray of lingering gun smoke. Overhead, the halogen lights from the towers cast a harsh glare onto the rough gravel below, creating no shadows, only exposure. This was the most important drill in the training cycle, a simulated night assault in desert conditions, paired with an artificial sandstorm, a network of high-powered fans, combined with a specialized fine dust to recreate the battlefields of Afghanistan. No one liked it. It numbed the eyes, killed the radio, and destroyed weapons if anyone got careless about maintenance. SEAL Team 3 was split into two elements, advancing on the target from the north and southwest. Everything ran smoothly for the first 10 minutes, the sound of rifle stocks brushing against armor, silent hand signals in the haze, and the familiar mechanical clicks of rounds chambering amid air, thick with machine wind and burnt oil. Then it happened. A dry click rang out, not the usual sound of a round being chambered, but something off, short of breath, like a whispered warning from the weapon's own body. The lead marksman, the same operator Hannah, had helped strip down an HK-416 the day before, stopped. He tried cycling it again, but the trigger was locked, unmoving. The underbarrel grenade launcher was dead as well. Something was jammed, or worse, broken. In the swirling dust, the worst thing wasn't the silence of a dead gun. It was the feeling of being left behind without explanation. The team was forced to shift, losing tempo, losing initiative. In a real engagement, that kind of error could have gotten the whole unit killed. On the perimeter, Hannah sat beside the mobile technical truck. She wasn't part of the drill formation, but as always, she stayed to watch. No one told her to. It was just, she didn't leave when things weren't finished. She heard that click, even from over 50 meters away, and knew it was bad. Without hesitation, Hannah slung her tool bag over her shoulder and pushed through the dust like a mechanic walking into the middle of the desert. No call, no permission. She reached the operator as he was struggling with the rifle. He was about to wrench the stock when Hannah placed a hand on the barrel, not stopping him, but with a clear enough signal, "Let me." Under the dim, dusty light, Hannah's hands didn't shake. She slid a cleaning rod into the gas system and extracted a clump of grit bound together by old oil, a result of a weapon that hadn't been properly flushed after the last drill. Next, she opened the buffer tube, separated the grenade launcher assembly, blew out the debris, reassembled. Every motion was deliberate, without excess or shortage. The whole process took no more than 2 minutes, but in that time, every other sound seemed to vanish. She no longer heard the wind, no longer saw the dust, only the steel, the oil, and the scent of sweat. Her movements were a refrain, each beat echoing from her childhood, from her father, from the nights spent beside an ammo crate under the porch. She didn't scold, didn't lecture. When the rifle cycled again, smooth and precise, she handed it back as if she had merely polished a glass someone had spilled. Then she turned and walked away, leaving a single boot print in the thick dust, the only one heading opposite the SEAL formation, advancing toward the target. The marksman watched her go. He said nothing, but this time his eyes held not surprise, but something closer to gratitude and respect. The drill went on. The formation adjusted its route and completed the simulation on time. In the training report, no one mentioned the minor incident. No credit line was written, but everyone who had been there remembered. And at the weekend debrief, when a training officer asked, "Any suggestions for adjusting technical protocols?" Brick Callahan, the man who was always silent at the back of the room, spoke. "Next time, have Carter check it before we run the course." 1 sentence, 6 words. But for Hannah, it was the first oath she'd ever received that didn't need to be written. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part that will make you stop and marvel. Take a second to leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. There was no award ceremony, no formal commendation, and no trumpet call when Hannah Carter stepped into the technical bay the next morning. But Camp Pendleton, like every training base that has witnessed the silence of courage, had its own way of saying that people had changed the way they saw you. That morning, the sky was slightly overcast. A cloud of ash drifted over the range. Hannah unlocked the armory door on time as usual, stepping inside expecting nothing but the familiar scent of old oil and the creak of worn hinges. But there was something unusual. Someone had neatly reorganized her toolkit, every screwdriver, every bottle of oil precisely in the order she kept them, though no one else had ever bothered to care. In the corner, Ghost, the SEAL marksman she had helped fix an HK-416-4, was cleaning his rifle. Light reflected off the metal surface like an unfinished portrait. He didn't look up immediately. Only when she passed by did he stop, turn, squint as if to see her more clearly, and then smile. A very small smile, restrained, almost hesitant, but clear enough. And it came with a nod. That was different, he said, not loud, not in a commanding tone, but the way someone speaks about a jazz piece unlike anything else, yet one that makes you stop in the middle of the street. For the first time, Hannah didn't feel like she was walking into a room full of eyes watching out of doubt. It was as if, finally, the frequency of those eyes had shifted. Tank, a demolition specialist built like a brick wall, who once scoffed that female techs only know how to read the manual, also approached. He handed over an FNX 45 pistol, asking Hannah's opinion on how to fine-tune the hammer for a quicker strike. Then, as if realizing he'd broken a rule, he shrugged. Haven't seen a tech this confident and sharp in a long time. Don't fix it for me, just tell me what I'm doing wrong. That's enough. From that day on, the change didn't come in a rush. It seeped into the air, into questions asked at the right moment, into the nameless respect for someone once dismissed as the girl who plays with guns. A new recruit stripping his rifle for the first time asked Hannah, "Which point should I oil first?" That question used to be for Ghost. Now, she was the one they looked to, not because she's a woman and she's good, but simply because she was good. Hannah still didn't speak much. She didn't need to. When someone asked her what lubricant she used for their worn-out saw, she simply handed them the exact green tube, offering a faint smile not to show off, but to say, "I understand." She still cleaned weapons each night, still worked with her quarter, still checked every mechanism as if war could break out tomorrow. But now, each step she took no longer echoed alone. Callahan, the one who used to just watch, began assigning preliminary checks to Hannah before each drill. Not quite a compliment, but trust turned into action. For men like him, that meant more than a handshake. Even the base's administrative office, which rarely cared for temporary techs, unexpectedly invited her to a meeting on upgrading the 2026 weapons maintenance protocols. Not because she was representing women, but because they needed someone with real-world insight, and her name came up as the one who saved the combat simulation from failure. In the mess hall, small taps on the shoulder began to happen. "Carter, that MP7 you tuned yesterday was perfect," or "Heard you know a trick to clean the hammer without disassembly. Willing to share?" Hannah responded simply, nod, demonstrate, then disappear before anyone could say thank you. For her, recognition didn't come from applause, but from people willing to pause, to ask, to listen. That was it. Enough. In a country like the United States, where technical roles are still underestimated when paired with gender, Hannah hadn't broken every barrier, nor become the face of a movement. But in a grueling SEAL unit, where every pull of the trigger decides life or death, she had made those who once thought she didn't belong stop, look, and adjust course. Do you think you can guess what happens next? Take a moment, comment number 1, or "I'm still here," to keep listening. The last day always carried a strange kind of quiet. Even though boots still thudded over the gravel, even though commands still barked over the internal radio, the atmosphere at Camp Pendleton that afternoon seemed coated in a layer of sunlit bronze dust, warm, still, and richer than usual. She stood alone behind the technical vehicle, where the gun mat she laid out every morning was spread perfectly squared, neither too much nor too little. The metal parts rested neatly, like chess pieces reset after a match. In the top left corner of the mat, as always, lay the familiar quarter. It bore a small scratch, now a nick along the edge from when it hit the concrete during a hurried maneuver in last week's simulated grenade drill. But today, looking at it, Hannah no longer saw a technical tool, no longer a marker or a way to calibrate sound. She saw a witness, a silent figure that had walked with her through a journey of doubt, dismissal, and the slow shift toward recognition. It had seen her hands accomplish what words never could. And now, it lay there like a quiet congratulation, simple, round, and weighted just enough. In the distance, the SEAL team was lining up for a group photo, A few glanced her way, each raising a silent thumbs up in turn. No names, no well wishes. In the military, there are acknowledgments never put to paper, but carved deeply into memory. Tank, the loud, muscle-bound jokester who loved to make cracks about guns and barbecue, this time simply walked past, leaving a clean, neatly folded gun cloth on her table. He said nothing. But in one corner of the cloth was a stitched line of green thread, the color signifying senior technician status in the team's unofficial hierarchy. Someone had sewn it, and he was the one to deliver it. Ghost, as usual, said nothing. He simply slung the HK 416 she had just fine-tuned, giving her a single nod. Perhaps he wanted to say something like, "Thanks for keeping me alive." But instead, he adjusted his sling to sit more snugly. In the language of warriors, that was already a poem. Then, as she was removing her technical jacket, the heavy fabric steeped in gun oil, sweat, and a touch of nostalgia, a figure approached. Not loud, not marked by rank. Just an older man in Air Force intelligence attire, the SOCOM TAC patch on his left shoulder. He handed her a plain white envelope, no sender's name, only a clean printed line, Advanced Technical Combat Program. She hadn't yet asked a thing when he nodded, answering softly. "We've reviewed your file and the field evaluations. You don't just fix weapons, you keep the fight alive." He paused for a beat, then spoke quietly, in what might be the most formal invitation the military could utter. "We want you in the Special Technical Training Program." Hannah looked at the envelope in her hand, then at the quarter. Her chest didn't surge the way books so often describe. No music swelled. There was only stillness. Like a freshly cleaned chamber, a round loaded with a soft click, and everything locking into place without a sound. She smiled faintly, not the smile of celebration, but of quiet agreement with herself. After all the time, the whispers, the glances, she no longer needed to say she was worthy. They had already said it for her in the way they looked, the way they acted, and the way they invited her to step through a new door. As the sunlight began to stretch long across the range, Hannah folded the technical mat for the last time. The quarter was placed in the center, wrapped in the cloth like something precious. No one saw. But she knew it would follow her into whatever came next. On the gravel, her footsteps made no sound, but this time, each one felt lighter. She had once been the girl who cleaned guns. Now, she was the one invited into the United States Special Operations Force's Advanced Tactical Program. Do you see how a small coin can bear witness to an entire life? Not everyone who holds a gun is a warrior. And not everyone who stands behind the line, quietly cleaning each tiny piece of steel, is someone forgotten. Hannah Carter's story reminds us that sometimes courage isn't found at the front lines, it's in the steady hands that keep the front from breaking. In a world that insists on labeling people by gender, role, and appearance, there are still those who choose to answer not with words, but with precise, quiet actions, and in the end, they move others. If you've ever been underestimated, ever endured in silence knowing you were skilled but unseen, then this story is for you. If you feel touched by it, leave a comment, share it with someone you believe needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow the channel, there are many more stories waiting to be told. We see each other in the small details, and those details sometimes are what save an entire battlefield.